Write in your book! Fill up the margins of the story with your notes. Record your reactions to characters. Mark where you see the complication and the climax. Put question marks where you don't understand something. Mark anything and everything. Get into dialogue with the story. Are the white spaces cluttered by your own handwriting? If not, you probably haven't analyzed the story enough. You need to do some more close reading. By the way, sticky notes, very good for people who are worried about reselling their books. You can fill up your textbook with, I like the 3x5 ones that are lined. Really good for taking notes. You also might use some strategies for generating ideas. These are tried and true methods of discovery, some of them going back to Aristotle and the ancient Greeks, some of them going back to You'll see that most of them involve asking and answering questions. The technical term for using questions this way is heuristics. But of course that's not the only way to generate ideas. As an academic writer, you want to find out what works best for you, given your own strengths and weaknesses. Here are strategies to help you start to generate ideas. Talk. Find someone who has read the same story and talk about it. Argue, agree, explore your thoughts together. If you're interested in a particular issue that arises in the story, talk about that issue with other people. For instance, James Joyce's Araby. You might begin with some basic questions like which characters appeal to you and why. Ask a friend what he felt like when he first fell in love. Talk about your own experiences. Have you ever felt the same kind of disillusionment that the narrator feels? Let the conversation go where your interests take it. Class discussion, classroom analysis is talk extraordinaire. What did people have to say about the story in class? Did you discover any angles to the story that did not occur to you before? Did anyone react differently from you? Which passages did you discuss? What was said about those passages? In an online class, you don't get quite the same thing. So you have to make up for that on the discussion board. Talk a lot on the discussion board, if you can. Brainstorm. That's just talking with a little more direction. Ooh, one more point about talking. Join me in the virtual office hours. That is a really good place to have a chat with me about what you're reading. Okay, brainstorm. That's just talking with a little more direction or formality. With pen and paper in hand, talk with a classmate about the story, jotting down everything that you think might be useful to you. Let one idea lead you to the next and write everything down. Both promising and unpromising ideas. You can sort them out later. Free writing. I found that this can be the best way to develop ideas and arguments. Give yourself a small stretch of time, say 15 or 20 minutes, and you can set a timer on your smartphone. And write down everything you can think of about the story. What attracts you to it? What do you find interesting? Don't police your thoughts. Write it all down. You'll mine all of those sentences later, finding the nuggets among the dross. The proverbial shower. You might have that eureka moment of discovery in the shower, where so many brilliant ideas have hatched. Or is it a cup of coffee and a blank computer screen that help you think? Well, probably not a blank computer screen, but maybe, I don't know. Does your mind grow fruit while you're sitting on the bus, listening to classical music? Figure out for yourself what makes your intellect productive, and do it. 2. Planning. Review all of those discovery notes, whether they're in the margins of your book, in a notebook, in a computer document, or on sticky notes stuck on the edges of your desk. Try to identify the theme that emerges out of the discovery stage. What is it you most want to talk about? What issues raised in the story interest you the most? Remember, themes tend to be abstractions, like friendship or war, or gender roles. Perhaps there's a cluster of ideas that are all related to each other. Try to identify them, write them down. Even if it's only 1 or 2 words, write it down. That cements it in your mind. Ultimately, your goal during planning is to offer an assertion concerning this theme, to claim that the story has this or that to say about the theme. At this point, you could be very far along in your thinking. You might be able to venture a pretty complex assertion. Go ahead if you're ready. That statement will be your first draft of a thesis statement. A thesis is a short statement, usually 1 or 2 sentences, that encapsulates your interpretation. The purpose of your paper is to persuade readers to agree with that statement. So this is the most important part of your paper. This is your destination. It will guide you as you construct your arguments. Every paragraph should play some role in getting readers to that thesis. If you're not ready to draft a thesis statement, don't worry about it. Use your theme as a guide for now. Either way, at this stage, you're dealing mostly with arrangement, sifting through your discovery notes, identifying those ideas that you want to use and arrange them in some order. Which idea comes first after the theme or thesis? What seems to come logically after that? What's the third thing you want to talk about? What idea does that logically set up? It should seem to you that X logically precedes Y, that you have to dispense with Y before you can proceed to Z. If your organization mirrors the chronology of the story, that's a red flag. It might mean that you're not really constructing an argument, but instead you are summarizing the plot. Perhaps you're making a few observations as you go along, but you're not really proving a point. Ask yourself, what do I want my readers to believe? And start again. You might be able to keep your arrangement in your head, but I recommend that at the very least you jot down a sketchy outline. Probably you don't want to get more detailed than that, but at this stage you should be thinking that each of the items in your outline is a potential paragraph. The paragraph is your main unit of organization, and you'll use paragraphing to help your reader recognize the stages in your argument. Don't forget that writing is recursive. As you are arranging your thoughts, you might discover new ideas, and almost surely, as you begin drafting your paper, you'll realize you need to arrange your paragraphs. 3. Drafting. In the drafting stage, you actually write what resembles a paper. Consequently, students often find this point the most challenging. The words don't come. You stare at a blank screen. The fingers on the keyboard are uninspired. Because this is a rough draft, don't worry about an introduction. Most writers find that to write an effective introduction, they have to wait to the very last stage of the process. Fretting about an introduction at this early stage is probably wasted energy. All you need at the head of your paper right now is your first version of your thesis. Then use your outline. You don't have to write from beginning to end. Pick a section that you feel most confident about. Maybe it's your third point, but you already have a couple of passages in the text that you know support the idea. Begin where you're most sure of yourself. Then once the ball is rolling, go back to the other parts. Many writers try too hard on their first draft. They'll work on one paragraph, realize it's not quite right, and so they'll tinker with it, rewrite it, improve it, revise it again. Resist the temptation to perfect one paragraph before you move on to the next. Your main goal in drafting is to get all of your ideas and evidence down for the first time in paragraph format. You're in a conversation with yourself, so there's no need for perfection. No one else is going to see what you've written. If you tend toward this kind of perfectionism, you should train yourself to be comfortable with a poorly argued train of thought or an awkwardly stated complex idea. You'll have plenty of time to improve things later. So just keep moving on from one point in your outline to another. You might even time yourself. Allow 10 minutes to write your second paragraph. After 10 minutes, move on to paragraph 3, no matter what stage paragraph 2 is in, even if you've nothing on paper but a couple of broken sentences. When I assign a rough draft for homework, I tell my students to give themselves a circumscribed amount of time, an hour perhaps, no more than 2. Don't waste time polishing anything. Just write. When you're done writing your arguments, you should draft a full conclusion. Sum up your arguments and restate your thesis, probably in different words. Now that you've drafted your first version of your arguments, ask yourself again, What is it that I want my readers to believe about the story? You might discover that your answer to that question is different, perhaps even very different, from what it was in the discovery stage. That's okay. In fact, it's a good sign, as you'll see when you get to revising. Number 4, revising. Stage 4. Revising is a lot more important than many writers realize. This stage will probably require most of your effort and time. If writing the entire paper from discovery to proofreading takes you 10 hours, you could easily spend 5 or more hours on this stage, revising. Take a hard look at your rough draft. It's best to take a day off after writing your rough draft, so you can come to it cold, so to speak, reading it with a more objective eye. Rough draft is probably the wrong metaphor because it implies that your draft is a gemstone that just needs a little judicious cutting and polish before you turn it in. Instead, think of drafts like mountains that you're going to mine to find veins or seams of argument embedded in the paragraphs. I really think of that first draft as a type of discovery. By writing it, you discover your arguments. Finding your thesis. The first thing you want to dig out of your mountain is your thesis. What is it that you really want to prove about the story? What do you think the story means? Take some real care here. The statement must be something debatable. For example, let's consider again Walker's story, Everyday Use. It is about a family of farmers, African Americans, during the Civil Rights Movement. One sister has left home to go off to college, a career, and has converted to Islam. The other sister and the mother have stayed home, living a hardscrabble life according to the pattern they always have through generations under Jim Crow. Here's a statement that is not a thesis. In Alice Walker's story, two sisters compete for possession of a family's heirloom quilt. One who has left the farm behind wants to preserve it as an object of folk art, a symbol of her cultural heritage. The other, who still lives on the farm, wants to use the quilt as a bed cover, which will wear it out. This statement comes close to naming one of the themes. The story is about what is gained and what is lost by upward mobility. Very few readers, if any, would disagree with that statement. Most would accept that the story is about upward mobility. That statement is not up for debate. If no one would dispute it, there's no point in writing a paper to prove it, because interpretive papers are supposed to persuade skeptical readers to agree with your interpretation.